There's a moment in dating that confuses so many women. He acts interested, then distant. He looks at you like you matter, then pretends nothing is happening. And you start wondering, does he like me or am I imagining it? Here's what most people miss. When a man shows certain behaviors, it's not indifference, it's internal conflict. He's not calm, he's battling himself. If he teases you more than others but gets awkward when things turn serious, that's tension. If he remembers tiny details about your life but claims he's not looking for anything, that's contradiction. If he gets subtly jealous but refuses to label what you are, that's emotional resistance. Watch how he reacts when you pull back. A man fighting feelings will suddenly lean in. He'll find excuses to text. He'll show up. Because distance forces clarity. Pay attention to his body language, prolonged eye contact, protective gestures, nervous energy. Those are emotions trying to surface. And here's the most powerful sign. He struggles when you talk about other men. Not dramatically, not possessively, but something shifts. His tone changes. His energy tightens. A man who feels nothing is consistent in his detachment. A man who feels everything but is afraid, he's inconsistent. He's reactive. He's conflicted. The key is this. Don't chase clarity from his words. Watch his patterns. Feelings are revealed through behavior, not speeches. When you see repeated tension between what he says and how he acts, understand something. He's not confused about you. He's scared of how much you matter. When a man is sending mixed signals, most women immediately assume one of two things. Either he isn't interested or he's playing games. But there's a third possibility that's far more common and far more complex. He's experiencing internal conflict. Mixed signals are often the external symptom of an internal battle. Attraction feels good, but vulnerability feels risky. And when a man starts developing real feelings, especially if he wasn't planning to, it can disrupt the sense of control he believes he has over his life. One part of him wants to move closer. Another part wants to protect himself. That tension creates inconsistency. You'll see it in small but noticeable ways. He leans in emotionally, asks deeper questions, opens up slightly, and then suddenly becomes distant the next day. He initiates contact consistently for a week, then goes quiet. He makes future-oriented comments, then brushes them off as jokes. It feels confusing because the energy isn't stable. But instability doesn't automatically mean disinterest. Often, it means he hasn't resolved what he feels. Internal conflict shows up as behavioral contrast. When he's with you, the connection feels strong. When he's away from you, his logical mind takes over. He starts questioning, is this moving too fast? What if this gets complicated? What if I lose control? Instead of addressing those fears directly, he unconsciously creates space. That space isn't always a strategy. Sometimes it's self-protection. Men who are emotionally guarded, especially those with past disappointments, are more prone to this pattern. They may have learned that attachment leads to pain, pressure, or loss of independence. So when genuine connection begins forming, their nervous system reacts before their heart can fully settle into it. They don't wake up thinking, how can I confuse her today? They wake up thinking, I need to make sure I'm not getting in too deep. This is why hot and cold behavior can feel so intense. When he's warm, he's operating from emotion. When he's cold, he's operating from fear or logic. Neither side is fake. Both are real. That's what makes it so hard to interpret. Here's the important distinction. Internal conflict still produces investment. Even in his distance, you'll notice he doesn't disappear completely. He circles back. He checks in. He reacts when you pull away. If there were no feelings, there would be no return. Indifference is steady. Conflict is inconsistent. The mistake many women make is responding to mixed signals with over-pursuit. When he pulls back, they push forward, trying to stabilize the connection. But pressure doesn't resolve his internal battle, it intensifies it. The more he feels pushed, the more he feels he's losing control, and the colder he may become. Instead, emotional steadiness is powerful. When you remain grounded and consistent, you create safety without chasing. You allow him to resolve his internal tension without adding more to it. Mixed signals are frustrating, yes, But when they stem from internal conflict rather than manipulation, they reveal something important. He feels enough for there to be a battle. And battles only happen when something matters. When someone tries to suppress how they feel, those emotions don't simply disappear. They go underground. And when feelings are pushed down instead of expressed directly, they tend to surface in indirect ways. This is what emotional suppression does. It creates behavioral leakage. A man who is fighting his feelings may tell himself he's staying logical, detached, or unaffected. He may avoid defining the relationship. He may insist it's casual. He may even act slightly indifferent in conversations. But emotions don't operate on logic alone. If he feels something deeply, it will show, just not in the way you expect. You might notice it in his body language first. He holds eye contact a second longer than necessary. He positions himself closer to you in group settings. His tone softens when he speaks to you compared to others. These subtle shifts aren't calculated. They're unconscious signals that his guard drops before his mind can catch up. Emotional leakage also appears through protective behavior. If someone speaks dismissively about you, he reacts. If you mention being stressed, he wants to help. If you're walking in a crowded place, he instinctively guides you. These gestures aren't dramatic declarations of love. They're quiet signs of care breaking through restraint. Another common form of leakage is jealousy, even if it's mild. He may not openly claim you. He may say he doesn't believe in labels. But the moment you mention another man, something changes. His questions become sharper. His posture tightens. He may tease you about it, downplay it, or act overly casual. Yet there's a subtle shift in energy. That reaction is emotion surfacing before pride can contain it. Sometimes suppression shows up as irritation. This is the one that confuses many women. When a man feels deeply but doesn't want to, he can become slightly reactive. Small things seem to bother him more than they should. He might pull back suddenly after an especially intimate moment. Why? Because closeness triggered something he isn't ready to face. Instead of saying, "That scared me," he creates distance. There's also overcompensation. A man trying to hide feelings may exaggerate how independent he is. He'll emphasize how busy he is, how focused he is on work, how he's not the relationship type. The more he says it, the more you should listen to the tone rather than the words. Overemphasis often reveals what someone is trying to convince themselves of. The key principle is this: feelings demand expression. If they aren't expressed verbally, they will emerge behaviorally. Energy shifts. Reactions intensify. Attention becomes selective. He may not confess what he feels, but his behavior becomes inconsistent with true indifference. True emotional neutrality is calm and steady. Emotional suppression is tense and reactive. When you understand behavioral leakage, you stop relying only on what he says. You observe patterns. Does he show up when it matters? Does he react when you pull away? Does he invest effort even while claiming it's casual? Emotions that don't have permission to speak will always find another outlet. And when a man is secretly fighting his feelings, his behavior will often tell the truth long before his words do. Fear of vulnerability is one of the most powerful forces in dating, and it rarely announces itself openly. A man will not usually say, "I'm scared of how much I care about you." Instead, fear disguises itself as logic, busyness, independence, or emotional control. But underneath all of it is one simple truth: caring deeply makes him feel exposed. When a connection starts to feel real, it introduces risk. The risk of rejection, the risk of not being enough, the risk of losing freedom, the risk of being hurt the way he may have been hurt before. For some men, especially those who have experienced betrayal, sudden breakups, or emotionally demanding relationships, vulnerability feels like stepping into danger without armor. So what does he do? He manages the risk. He might slow the pace just as things are becoming more intimate. He may avoid defining the relationship even though his actions show investment. He keeps conversations light when they begin drifting into emotional territory. Not because he doesn't feel it, but because naming it makes it real. And once it's real, he can lose it. Distance becomes a coping mechanism. When he senses himself getting attached, he instinctively creates space to regain control. It's not always conscious. It can happen right after a meaningful moment, a deep conversation, a long hug, a night where you both felt unusually connected. The next day, he feels the weight of that closeness and pulls back slightly. That pullback is not a lack of emotion. It's fear trying to stabilize him. Men who struggle with vulnerability often equate emotional openness with weakness. They may pride themselves on being composed and self-reliant. Letting someone see their softer side challenges that identity. So instead of expressing affection freely, they ration it. They show care indirectly. They avoid statements that feel permanent or binding. You may hear phrases like, "Let's just see where this goes," or "I don't want to rush anything." On the surface, those sound reasonable. But paired with consistent emotional intensity, they can signal hesitation rooted in fear. His heart may be leaning forward while his mind is pulling the brakes. Another sign of vulnerability fear is over-analysis. He may question compatibility too early. He may magnify small differences. He may focus heavily on practical obstacles. This isn't always about those issues themselves. Sometimes it's his mind searching for logical reasons to slow something that feels emotionally overwhelming. Here's what's important to understand. Fear of vulnerability doesn't mean he's incapable of love. It means he hasn't fully learned how to feel safe within it. And safety, for many men, comes from control. Love, however, requires surrender at some level. When you recognize this pattern, the goal is not to force openness. Pressure intensifies fear. Instead, consistency and emotional steadiness create safety. When he sees that connection doesn't immediately lead to chaos, loss, or pressure, his nervous system begins to relax. A man who is afraid of vulnerability will often test stability before he commits emotionally. He watches how you respond to space. He observes whether conflict leads to drama or resolution. He measures whether closeness feels peaceful or overwhelming. Fear creates distance, but only when feelings are strong enough to threaten his sense of control. And if he's creating distance while still staying connected, that's often the clearest sign that the battle isn't about you, it's about how much you matter to him. One of the clearest signs that a man is secretly fighting his feelings is the contrast between his level of attention and his verbal denial. This is where confusion intensifies. Because on one hand, he acts invested. On the other hand, he minimizes what's happening. And that contradiction is not random, it reveals an internal tug of war. When a man is emotionally affected by you, his focus sharpens. He notices things. He remembers small details you mentioned weeks ago, your favorite coffee order, the story about your childhood, the stressful meeting you had coming up. He checks in about them. That kind of attention isn't casual. Attention is currency. We invest it where we care. Yet at the same time, he might say things like, "I'm just going with the flow," or "I'm not looking for anything serious right now." Listen carefully, words can be protective shields. Behavior is much harder to fake consistently. Heightened awareness is another subtle signal. In group settings, he tracks where you are in the room. If you laugh with someone else, his eyes shift. If you go quiet, he notices the change in your mood. Even when he pretends to be disengaged, his attention betrays him. You don't monitor what doesn't matter. He may also prioritize you in ways he downplays. He makes time when he claims he's busy. He rearranges plans to see you, but jokes about it being no big deal. He responds quickly, but acts casual about it. This minimizing language is a way of reducing emotional exposure while still feeding the connection. Another powerful indicator is emotional responsiveness. If you pull back slightly, his energy changes. If you become less available, he becomes more attentive. A man who truly doesn't care stays steady in his detachment. But a man who is invested while pretending not to be will react to shifts. Your absence feels heavier than he expected. You might also notice subtle future references slipping out. He'll mention an event happening months from now and casually include you. Then, almost immediately, he'll soften it with humor or ambiguity. That's emotion surfacing before his guard catches it. His mind says, "Careful." His heart already included you. This push-pull dynamic happens because admitting feelings creates vulnerability. If he openly acknowledges how much he cares, he risks losing leverage, control, or emotional safety. So instead, he tries to maintain a narrative of casualness while his actions quietly contradict it. The key is pattern recognition. Anyone can say the right thing once. Anyone can show attention occasionally. But when investment is consistent, when he repeatedly shows up, remembers, prioritizes, reacts, that's not accidental. Pay attention to where effort flows. Does he initiate contact regularly? Does he make plans ahead of time? Does he seek your opinion? Effort reveals value, and value reveals feeling. When a man increases his attention while decreasing his verbal commitment, he's often managing fear, not absence of emotion. He wants proximity without fully surrendering to what that proximity means. In those moments, don't chase reassurance from his words. Watch his consistency. Because when attention remains high despite verbal denial, it's rarely indifference. It's someone trying to downplay something that already matters more than they're ready to admit. When a man is secretly fighting his feelings, one of the most telling signs is the tension between what he says and what he does. Words are easy to control. Actions, less so. When logic and emotion are in conflict, his behavior often reveals the truth before his explanations do. He might say, "I'm not serious about this," or "I'm just taking things slow," while his actions communicate the opposite. He shows up when it matters. He prioritizes your needs. He remembers details that most people would forget. These actions aren't accidental. They reflect the emotional investment he's trying to manage internally. You'll also notice inconsistencies in how he expresses himself. One moment he's playful, teasing, engaging deeply. The next, he withdraws, claiming he's busy or tired. That oscillation is a result of internal debate. Part of him wants to be close, part of him fears what closeness might bring. The more important you are, the more intense that push-pull can become. Conflicts between logic and emotion often create micro-behaviors that betray him. He may hesitate before responding to a text, only to write something thoughtful hours later. He may make plans, but hesitate to commit fully until the last minute. He may joke about not caring while acting with a level of attention that contradicts his words. These small contradictions are consistent with someone trying to reconcile fear and desire simultaneously. Sometimes the tension shows up as overcompensation. He may emphasize his independence or suggest he's not ready for a relationship, almost as if to convince both himself and you. Yet he continues to invest emotionally in subtle ways, checking in, remembering your preferences, or giving you support when you need it. That's the behavior of someone whose heart is ahead of his mind. The conflict can also surface in his responses to intimacy. When you're vulnerable, he may mirror that vulnerability briefly, then retreat. He might initiate physical closeness, then pull back. He may share personal details, then downplay them as if they didn't matter. Every oscillation signals that he is aware of his feelings, but is not yet comfortable fully expressing them. Another clue is how he reacts to scenarios involving other people. If he struggles when you mention other potential romantic interests, it's not possessiveness in the extreme sense, it's emotional awareness surfacing despite his attempts to act nonchalant. His mind may try to rationalize, but his feelings create a subtle but undeniable reaction. Recognizing the conflict between logic and emotion allows you to interpret his behavior accurately. Many women focus solely on what a man says, missing the behavioral cues that reveal his true investment. Actions speak louder than words, especially when words are carefully chosen to mask vulnerability. The critical insight here is understanding motivation. His denial, rationalizations, and distancing aren't signs that he doesn't care. They are protective mechanisms. He's navigating the tension of wanting closeness while fearing exposure. He's balancing desire with self-preservation. When patterns of contradiction emerge consistently, it's a signal to observe rather than pressure. You don't need verbal affirmation to understand that feelings exist. Look at how he behaves when circumstances allow him to be unguarded. Watch for consistency in effort, attention, and responsiveness. That is the clearest evidence of someone emotionally engaged yet wrestling with their own hesitation. A man fighting his feelings shows a constant, subtle dance between what he wishes he could express and what he believes he must hold back. Understanding this tension is key to seeing the truth behind the mixed signals. It's in that space between words and actions that real feelings quietly reveal themselves. The truth about a man who is secretly fighting his feelings is that his heart often speaks louder than his words, even when he tries to hide it. Mixed signals, emotional suppression, fear of vulnerability, heightened attention, and the tension between logic and emotion are not signs of indifference. They are signs of investment. What you see on the surface may be distance, denial, or inconsistency, but if you pay attention to his patterns, behavior, and subtle reactions, the underlying truth becomes clear. He cares more than he's willing to admit. The key is not to chase verbal confirmations or demand explanations. Instead, observe, stay grounded, and recognize the signals that reveal real emotional engagement. A man who is emotionally conflicted is struggling with his feelings, not lacking them. By understanding the signs and respecting the process, you can see the depth of his connection without needing it spelled out, because actions always speak louder than words, especially when love is involved.